I'm going to go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here this evening for our August 2021 regular Maury County School Board meeting. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Kinzer if you will call the roll.
Okay, Chair Fulbright. Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Kinzer's here. Mr. Fulbright?
Here.
Mr. Moore? Present. Ms. Urban? Mr. Sims? Here. Mr. Hooper?
Here.
Mr. Howell? Here. Mr. Lindsay? Mr. Dudley? We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And I will say Mr. Lindsay texted me and said he would not be able to be here this evening. Give me 1 second. Okay. At this time, we'll stand. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance and then followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the motion or the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion? Have a motion from Ms. Parker. Second from Mr. Moore. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Pass that down the wheel. Okay, we are not on the screen tonight, so we're going to have to do a roll call vote. Or let's just do a voice vote on this one, because if we have any dissent, we'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have an agenda for tonight's meeting. Recognitions and announcements. Mr. Hickman, Mr. Gaines, anybody? Anything? Okay. Just wanted to have everybody have that opportunity. I will make an announcement and a recognition that we have a very dedicated teaching staff at all of our schools this year. I went by and visited one this morning as they were doing their professional development, and I think we're off to a very good school year so far, just from the little bit I heard from the way things went yesterday. So I want to recognize all of our principals, assistant principals, teachers, and staff. Public delegations. I had somebody make a request to speak, but I think it may have been withdrawn. And I don't see any record of it on the agenda. Is there anyone signed up in the back? Okay, thank you. Staff reporting. Anything you'd like to share with us, Mr. Hickman?
Just wanted to give you an update that we do have several positions that are still open. I've checked with several superintendents across our area, and we're all facing the same kind of frustrations of a lot of open positions, not getting a lot of applicants. It's really showing that there's pointing toward a true teacher shortage, and so we are looking at ways that we can bring some folks in and get these filled as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hickman? Okay. We have several items on our consent agenda. Several of them were
Mr.
policy.
Chairman, I just want to make sure and point out that we don't miss the, if I'm not mistaken, is there artwork or is there not?
There is artwork. Is it in front of us or?
Okay.
I can't see in front of me, so.
That's been there.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure those kids get credit if there is artwork.
Okay. We do want to thank Riverside Elementary for providing any artwork we may have at this meeting or any future meeting. I know the kids over at Riverside are very proud of what they do, and Mr. Holmes is an awesome principal. All right, consent items. Anything that needs to be pulled off of the consent agenda? A lot of these were policy issues that were brought up during our work session and discussed. I believe there's a total of 27 total on our consent agenda. Do I have a motion for these items? Mr. Moore has made the motion. Ms. Parker has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on these 27 items on the consent agenda list? Seeing no discussion, I believe we'll vote. All those in favor of adopting these 27 items, signify by saying aye. Any objections? Okay. Consent agenda has passed. Moving to new business, I will turn it over to Mr. Laconin.
We don't have anything.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, that's a good thing then. Stick around, because you might have something a little bit later. Turning it over now to Mr. Gaines in instruction.
You see the item there first on the agenda, the Making Schools Works PD. We asked to pull that from consent last meeting because we have approximately $38,000 left in that grant, and the grant ends September 30th. So the vendor had sent us a proposal but did not include all of the $38,000. We went back to him and asked him to look at some other options. He came back and they brought back some more coaching days. So we added some coaching days to that agreement to make it the full $38,000 so that we can execute that PO and be able to request those funds prior to September 30th, or at least have the funds allocated by September 30th.
Thank you. Is there any, I guess I need a motion on this. I have a motion from Ms. Parker, second by Mr. Sims. Is there any further discussion? Hearing, seeing no lights, we will vote. All those in favor of approving this bid signify by saying aye. Any of those opposed? Okay, that one passes. Let's move on to Esser 3.0. Mr. Gaines, I'll turn it over to you.
Mr. Chairman, you asked us at the work session to go back and mainly look at bringing back some options to you that might be alternative items that could be funded in lieu of the HVAC systems or in lieu of other things. Of course, as you know, we did the survey information, talked to principals, surveyed teachers, surveyed you guys, surveyed all every stakeholder group that was mentioned, even in the state or the federal government required us. We tried to create a survey for them, gathered that information. Of course, keep in mind, we did have some funding areas that we sent out for people to look at, and of those requests, if there were other items, we asked them to submit those to us. Looking at that, the majority of the items that were submitted for survey they were agreed with those items. So those items at the top of the list were items that you see are primary funding areas. After the work session and some discussion, we went back and we met with principals again, asked them to reach out to teachers, got input again, and also through staff members, looked at other items that could be possibly funded through Esser. As you know, the Esser Grant is a grant that gives schools the opportunity, or districts the opportunity, to apply for funds to help them safely return to school or recover from the impacts of COVID. So in that vein, we tried to think of what things could, as you know, we've been impacted by funding, so there are some things that are there that could accelerate. For example, in the case of the CTE equipment, that CTE equipment is prioritized. It will be eventually funded. However, it would take them put in a process of each year prioritizing one item, putting it in the budget, or two items, trying to get those items funded, and it would take, could take exceedingly from 5 to 10 years. And this is just an example. What Esser gives us an opportunity to do, if it was funded that way, is accelerate those options. The same thing with the textbooks. As you know, we have approximately, you guys have helped us to get $1.5 million in the budget. As we all know, it doesn't take care of everything. When we have a large adoption, seemingly as we did with the reading adoption alone, we had to split it over 2 years because we didn't have enough funds to pay for the adoption in 1 year. Again, Esser is an opportunity for us to go ahead and pay that out if it's approved, and also get us prepared for the math adoption. As you know, next year we will be looking at math materials. and we'll meet as committees, and we will adopt, the teacher committees will look at the materials, they will adopt, materials that will be recommended to you for approval, and, we wanna get that done as early as we can in the winter or early spring, so that again, as we have funds available, we'll be ready to order that stuff, get it in. I think you can remember last year, when the items were in the budget wasn't approved till later. We did order those items, but we did not get those items until November. So we started with new curriculum late in the school year. We want to, constantly be able to have curriculum on hand, already ordered, ready to do the training in the summer, so when school starts in the fall, we'll be ready to go. With that, I'll open up for questions, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. I can tell a lot of work went into this. I do want to keep in mind that, as with a lot of things, we've asked our professional staff to put this together for us to see. I don't personally want to be trying to dictate where each penny goes, so I trust that you guys have put a lot of work, you ladies and gentlemen have put a lot of work into this, and we'll start our discussions there. Mr. Hickman.
I just want to be very mindful as the board looks at this. One of the things that we have to make sure with this specific grant, they were a little bit lenient when we did Esser 1.0 and Esser 2.0. However, this one, they are really looking at the application and making sure that we tie back our needs, what we ask for, to our stakeholder surveys, to our stakeholder meetings. So, if these things aren't what you guys like, we'll have to be careful what we add to it, because it has to be tied back. And we've surveyed, we've talked, we've had them in small meetings. So I just wanted to make sure to kind of put that out there with this.
Thank you. Ms. Kinzer?
Well, I want to commend you all for addressing all of the things that came up that night, giving us the information that we requested, and all of it seems really relevant to me for the ESSER funds. I do want to remind this board, though, and I think the $1,500 in the original one probably came from me, because I said other places were given $1,500, $2,000, and so forth. So I think $1,000 is what we told our teachers when we went through the budget process. We told them, we can't give you a raise out of the budget, but the state's going to give you a raise, and for the first time, we didn't use any of that money for anything but that raise, and hallelujah. But none of our budget went to help those teachers in the year that they have. So it's, to me, a non-starter not to include at least $1,000 bonus for them. I do like the idea of the substitute being, I think that is really something we need to make sure we're getting good substitutes in here, even if it's to attract even retired teachers to do that. I sent an email out to Mr. Fulbright because I thought it would save time if we, as board members, studied it and we could prioritize and see what areas we do agree with, and then we can hash out those other things. So I would like to hear what other board members' priorities are.
Are there any board members that would like to add to what Ms. Kinzer shared? Mr. Moore.
Sure. I did read what Ms. Kinzer had said on that, and I agree, but I think I have a different approach. Personally, I'm not comfortable moving ahead with this tonight. I think it requires that this board should sit down and have some in-depth discussions about it and really work out a plan with central office staff. I'm still not comfortable with what's been proposed here. I see additional options that I'm still just not fully comfortable with, that I think we need to flesh out. And that's where I'm at. I do feel like it does need some additional discussion from each board members to give their priorities. But I'd also like to hear some more discussions from staff about where their priorities are and how we actually have a cohesive plan. Because what I'm worried about is if we start as a board picking through this and just choosing what we like, that it's not going to be a cohesive plan that's actually going to give us measurable results. We're going to be throwing money at this over here and that over there, and we're not going to get, I'll be honest, that's one of the biggest concerns I have, is not getting any kind of results that we can measure or that we can tie back to specifically what we've done. And that's what worries me about some of the spending that's in here now.
Mr. Howell.
So several of the things on here, in going with
Ms. Kinzer, is the bonus. I think that that's something that's very warranted. I feel like we forget that our staff didn't just put in 40 hours. We've asked our staff to shorten breaks to be able to teach a class, to help out with the class. There are teachers that they get off at 3 o'clock or 3:15, and we're still there answering emails and phone calls and trying to make contact. So, I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into this that a $1,500 bonus is really not much. So I definitely want to make sure that we do have a staff bonus of at least $1,500, because I do think that that's something, we're in a teacher shortage here, and we want to make sure we can do everything we can possibly do to keep good quality educators here in Murray County. Does this do it? Maybe. I don't think it's enough, but, you know, it's a start. And then the grow your own is something, like I said, I've talked about before. I think that that's just a nominal amount. I think we could invest a lot more in that, because the more we invest in those people, the more likely they're to stay with us, because we've invested in them and they will want to stay with us. We gave them that opportunity. I can't say enough about that. I wish we would. I hope that we can do more with that. We can sit here and pick out our favorites and piecemeal this together, but the staff has done the job that we asked them to do. I don't know what else we can talk about. I mean, we can say, I have an idea and do this. I don't know. I personally don't know if it will meet the grant requirements or not. I mean, I can throw out ideas all day. Whether or not they meet the grant requirements or not, I don't know. These things, I'm going to have to take their word for it. These things will meet the grant requirement.
Okay. Mr. LeCohen.
I would just like to clarify that the $1,500 would be the gross pay on that. Obviously, there are federal income taxes, Social Security, Medicare, things that would come out of that. So what ends up in the pocket at the end of the day won't be exactly $1,500. It'll be less than that, but the gross payout on that, that's kind of what we had calculated. I just want to clarify.
Well, we have to figure that on anyway. Thank you. I want to ask Mr. Gaines, if you could, you said that a lot of this came from stakeholder interviews and surveys. Could you define for me what a stakeholder is? I mean, parents, I'm assuming.
Right, so that would be parent, student, teacher, community member. I will pull up we tried to look at, there were groups that our federal application defined. They looked like at certain organizations. So we sent one like directly to the NAACP. We tried to identify if we had an organization in our community that was on that list. We tried to create a survey and send it to them.
Okay.
But mainly, when you think about it in terms of stakeholders, you think about parents, students, staff, and community members at large.
About how many responses did we get?
For the
just off the top of your head,
14, it was around 11,000. I can get Jack to look at it real quick.
You don't have to go any further than what you just said. I think you've proved the point I wanted to make of this is more than just 2 or 3 people sitting around the table flipping a coin to see what we're gonna do. I think you've got a lot of input. You've taken in a lot of information, and yeah, there's things I wouldn't mind throwing another $10,000 this way or that way, but I'm also not going to come up here and spend a day working with you to do it. I'm going to trust you that you're going to do it the right way. Are there any other comments or points of discussion? Mr. Hooper.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So on here, if these are rough totals, I get that, but it's right now it's about 500,000 over what the grant says it was such. So I'm wondering if what on here that we have is going to have to come off, and if where. I'd like to know which one's planned to, because I also have another question about one of the things that are, I guess, some lower priorities is the summer professional development. I really like that idea. It seems like those match up well with something else I would bring up here in a minute. And it says on the last page of this document, something I believe that the bonuses could be paid out of Esser 2.0 and doesn't have to be taken out of this one. The 15 or the 1,000 on both that were listed on here could both come out of there, and we could also put things, more things in this one.
so far as the Esser 3.0, that would be more where that's where we've seen most of the people have been getting the bonus idea out of. Of course, we did tell you that we do have some additional funds in Esser 2.0, and then you saw that option of where we're over, that we would be able to maybe address some of those funding ideas in Esser 2 rather than Esser 1.
One of the other things that we're gonna look at too is because we know we're in an incredible teaching shortage, and it was recognized by this board, was when you look at the top where it talks about the teaching positions to reduce class, one of the options that we've talked about doing, and we got from, feedback from the board, was possibly moving classified EAs to classrooms to help with that reduction instead of teachers, which would be a savings as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin, did you have your last? Okay.
I was just going to input that while I also want to take care of our faculty, that's important. I also really like some of the things we're proposing here that's going to take care of our students. I like the idea of the textbooks. I like the idea of the CTE. I think this is a unique opportunity to get those things that we may or may not have the opportunity to do again. So I definitely want to take advantage of what's going to impact student success.
Okay, thank you. Don't believe I have a motion on this yet, do I? Okay, I'll need a motion if we're gonna do anything with this. Do we need to vote on it, I guess is my first question.
What would happen if you vote on the items that are above the line? We would translate those into a budget and bring that budget back to you, or we would move forward with doing the actual E-plan application, seeking approval from the state for our funding areas. Once that's done, then we would bring that budget back to you to approve.
Okay. Mr. Lacona.
I would like some clarification on the staff bonus about the partial payment for the $150 a month for employees that started in the middle of the school year. Specifically, it just says middle of the school year. There are some of those employees that started in the middle of the school year, left partially through that school year. There's not clarification of whether we would pay people that are not employed here anymore, or retirees, or, is it just for active employees? And then what is the effective first date that would be considered middle of the school year? I'm guessing you would start 7/26 or 8/1. As the beginning date to calculate that month. I just think if we add clarification in there, it could help, because middle of the school year, we could base it off of it could get detailed. There's a 200-day contract. Do we prorate? I know it says $150 a month, but just specifically, we want to know in finance exactly how to determine when and how much for the $150 a month. So an effective date would be helpful there, and a determination of, is this for active employees only?
Okay, Ms. Kinzer, do you speak to that?
My personal opinion would be 8/1 would be the effective date. It would be for full-time employees, and then it's prorated for assistants and all that, and it's for everyone.
This just says staff.
I thought that was kind of confusing as well, but I think that their raise, their 2.2 or 2.12 was effective 8/1, so this should be effective 8/1. I don't know what you consider middle of the year, so that means if someone comes on board halfway in the year, they're going to get a bonus. But once again, we're trying to attract teachers, right?
Basically, it's saying who arrived in the middle of the 2021 year. So if you were hired in October, then you miss out on 2 months of the $1,500 bonus if you use an effective date of 8/1. But let's say that employee started in October, they get $150 a month for October, November, December, January, so on and so forth. Let's say they leave in April. They're not here anymore. Am I giving that person a bonus or no? And I can pretty much understand that I would not do that. I would stop right there and I'd say, guys, what's going on here? But I think that clarification should be added.
Well, underemployment. If they leave, they're not underemployment.
Exactly.
I think that language needs to be in there, so be clear.
And in the past, the board has approved bonuses that you know, if it was like somebody was termed or was on a leave of absence, like, all that stuff, when a raise is passed, it's best to have it in writing, because when we get phone calls in our office of irate employees, it doesn't help our staff to not have clarification. So we just, like, middle of the school year, if we're starting August the 1st, are these only employees hired for the last school year? Or is it new employees that are just started right now on these contracts as well? Is this for 12 months? Is this from August the 1st up till this get approved? You know, that's something that, as far as we go, it would be good for us to have it in writing, so that way we can be like, this is what the board approved, this is what's in the plan for Esser. Just, like I said, it makes the calculations easily. And the other part is, a lot of this information is in Skyward. We changed to local government in January, so we need to know, we have access to Skyward, and we've downloaded payroll information and payroll stubs, but some of this data we're gonna need, we just wanna make sure we are prepared to give this if we're gonna do it
The way that it's in here.
if we have to go backwards, 'cause that software is gonna be gone,
Oh, man.
and we only have certain amounts of data available to us.
When you say Skyward, I go, ugh.
It's gone, but it's still here.
Yeah.
My understanding, and I know you do need to have it written down, but a 12-month, a 10-month, and 11-month employee would all just get the same thing. Right?
If you have an educational, or if you have a principal, for example, that's getting this bonus, their contract starts 7/1 for the new fiscal year. If it's a teacher, theirs starts later, so they would get $150.
But they get $1,500, period.
Well, they, not if they weren't here for the whole 2021 fiscal year. They wouldn't. They would get a partial, they'd get $150 per month for the months that they were here.
Okay.
We just need to
This
clarify.
is way over my pay scale.
We just need to stamp some red line tests in here that give us guidance on who gets it and who doesn't, and protects us. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Irvin.
So I have an idea that may not be popular, but it sounds good to me. My thought about giving it monthly is that sometimes that tends to not feel like a bonus. It tends to feel like everyday pay. So I remember back, you know, in times like this, I wonder if there's a way that perhaps we could divide it into like half years. And then, I know you're going to answer this, but just to finish my thought, do like a Christmas bonus, you know, because that's an appreciative time for most people, where they get half of it at Christmas, and then another half upon completion, like where it's summer bonus, and then it actually feels like a bonus. That may not be popular, but I would have probably liked that.
So just to clarify, this is it's a one-time bonus. It's just calculated based on the 2021 year. So, for example, if, you know, you were there for 10 months, the full 10 months, you get the full $1,500. If you were there for 8 months, you get $1,500 minus $300, $1,200. So you'd get it as a one-time payment. It's just how many months were you here for the 2021 school year. So you'd get it all at once. Yeah.
So when do we plan on paying that out then? Would it be at the end of the calendar year then? Or, I'm sorry, at the end of the school year, like in June, July?
We would pay it as soon as we have approval on this plan, because it's a reimbursable. As soon as we get approved for the funding, we would be able to move forward with it. So it could be this fall, because this is based on the 2021 school year, which is already ended.
I mean, as I'm reading it, it would say halfway through. I would say halfway through is January. Is that halfway through a school year? So if you were employed January 1st of this year and are currently employed, then you're eligible for this bonus. I mean, that's kind of how I would read it. It says current. If we need to put a date in there, I guess we could put a date in there, but, I mean, you know, whether or not you were an EA or a teacher or a bus driver or whatever, I mean, $1,500 to an EA is a lot more of a bonus than it is to a teacher. So, I mean, or a bus driver for that matter. And these are all things that we need to operate, and I'm not sure why you know, I think we just need to make a few dates here and move on with this.
frankly, this is exactly why I think we need a work session to hammer some of this stuff out. We are literally sitting at a voting meeting trying to figure out the logistics of something you guys want to spend $18 million on. I mean, come on. We should have had this already figured out, or we need to move it on to some kind of special meeting where we can go over this, review it, and then have a special call to actually vote on this once we know what we're doing. We're winging it.
The deadline to submit the application is August 27th. Yes. 27th. 27th.
Approve this, move it back to work session, do something. Mr. Howe?
I'd like to make a motion to approve it, making an amendment to the staff bonuses, clarifying start date of January 1st, 2021. I believe that's the only date you needed, really, wasn't it?
So basically,
For current employees that are still employed.
so people that get the bonus, they would get it as long as they were employed January 1st of 2021 and they're currently active.
Correct.
And they would get the full 1,500, correct? Or you would prorate it at $750 at January 1st, and if they were hired before that, then they would get the full 1,500.
Correct.
Okay.
That's how it reads, yeah.
Well, it just says middle of the school year, you get $150 a month. So I'm guessing middle of school year, January 1st.
Right.
So January, February, March, April, May, 500, 750, yeah, okay.
I just have to say I agree with Mr. Moore about this. I think this is way too much money to try to be piecemealing this at the last minute as far as bonuses. Personally, on the bonus, I'm not comfortable with it. It's not necessarily the amount, it's what it relates to. Somebody that taught here last year during the middle of the coronavirus, I'm more concerned about making sure that we have teachers teaching this year and going forward. I'm more concerned with making sure that we don't have 100 openings on July 1st that we're trying to fill, which we've just heard was an issue. The Grow Your Own program that has been discussed, I don't have a problem with it, but I didn't see really anything in there that related to hard to fill positions, which is I think what we're talking about. I'm not seeing how this plan really addresses the issues that we have in our district. I see us throwing money at some things, but I don't necessarily see it addressing the problems that we've identified in our district. Personally, I'd like to see this document really explicitly say how this is going to benefit students. If we're going to spend $1 million on X, how is this going to impact student learning, and what are we hoping to get out of it? There's $220,000 thereabouts in there for a data person. I'm comfortable with a data person as long as I know that this is something that we can turn around and go to our commissioners and say, hey, this is money that we've spent. This is why we're including it on our budget going forward, because we don't have this pot of money. But I really haven't heard anything like that from staff as to what that's being used for. I thought we were going to do this more one thing at a time when we talked about it before. But just blanket approval of this one, I'm not comfortable with.
I mean, if we want to go through line by line, that's piecemealing it together 101. I don't think that's what we need to do. I am not an educator. I think that's no surprise. Educators have put this together with input from teachers, from students, from parents, from outside sources, which is what's required of it. I mean, all I'm doing is putting a little tweak in there to tweak something that was clarifying. I'm not changing the plan fundamentally. I think this is a good plan, personally. But once again, I'm not an educator. I'm not opposed to if this doesn't pass, I mean, obviously we can have another meeting and go through this, but, I mean, I don't know what we're going to change at the end of the day. Do I have questions? Sure. I've got questions about our current budget. I've got questions about a budget from 2 years ago. I'm not here to micromanage the everyday workings of everything that we do. I'm here to oversee the parameters of this budget and the policies that go with it, and that's where I'm at. I mean, if our staff has put this together, why are we paying our staff to put this together? And then to question everything that they put together, I don't know why, I don't know. Why are we paying them? I don't understand.
I'm sorry, this is probably off topic of what's going on, but I'm going back to the $150 a month. So if we move forward with how it is right now, a principal will have worked 6 months on their contract past January 1, and a teacher will have worked a total of 5 months. So they would get different bonuses if a principal started January 1st and a teacher started January 1st. The principal would get 6 months times $150, and the teacher would get 5 months times $150. So it's almost like you can't go based off of their contract and what they work, because they work different months. That's why we have so many. That's why payroll's not that easy. I'll just be blunt. That's why there's a lot going on with payroll. We can just say rather than do it monthly, we could do it if you're hired after such and such date, you get half the bonus. If you're hired before such and such date, you get the full bonus.
Ask something real quick. Is this, we're approving the amount and the purpose of the funds, correct? Could the actual nuts and bolts distribution of this be done between your office and the Human Resource Office?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're just approving the budget. I'd be fine. Let's take the nuts and bolts out of the plan then.
I'm just asking a question. I'm not saying one way or another.
Yeah, we can just say approve a $1,500 bonus to be determined by HR and office administration.
Okay. Ms. Parker.
Okay, I'm still not an educator, I acknowledge that. However, I was elected on this board and I didn't have to be an educator. We approve a budget that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're not educators. This is $18 million that has the potential to move our district forward. I don't think there is any problem with any board member wanting to look at this in more detail or wanting to ask questions about it. That's all I'm doing. I think I'm doing my job. Doug's not an educator, but we rely upon Doug on a lot of these things. And quite frankly, what I don't understand is why we're having a discussion about the nuts and bolts when obviously I would imagine Doug, Scott, Eric, Mr. Hickman, whoever could have had that discussion before it's even brought to us. I don't know why it's coming to us with us trying to break it apart and figure out the nuts and bolts of it. I know that surveys were sent out. I feel like it's a little disconcerting to me to hear, well, we just have to go with whatever was in the survey. I didn't have any input on what was put in the survey. I got the survey that said, hey, we're going to have this, we're going to do this, we're going to do... I mean, I feel like now I'm pretty much locked into what was in a survey that I got to get input, to give my input on. It's just a little backwards to me. What I haven't heard, I know that there are vacancies that exist in this district. I know that we have, special ed teachers that have 50 kids on their roll. What are we doing about that this year? Not next year, not the following year. What are we doing about that this year? I'm not seeing all those needs. I'm sure if we talked about the first day of school, I'm sure we could identify some needs. And when I look at this document, what was originally provided to us, I'm not saying it's not a good draft. What I'm saying, though, is I can look at it and tell that SPED and CTE got asked, hey, how do you want to spend that $7 million if that doesn't get approved? That's what happened. Now, are those SPED needs or those CTE needs, should they be included in the first draft? I mean, I would say probably they should be. But that's not what we were given. And I think us asking questions is what contributed in them being provided in the second draft. I just think we may need to look at some of the things that are on the second sheet just as closely as we did on the first sheet. That's all I'm asking for.
Ms. Irvin.
So, forgive me, I'm confused because I'm totaling, and I need somebody to explain this to me, like over $21 million worth of possibilities. And I thought the last time we were here, I kind of thought like Ms. Parker, we listed a lot of options. We spoke about potentially not doing the HVAC units and looking at substitutions for that. And I can't get my numbers. I'm sitting here and doing the math as we speak. I've gotten numbers from, all over the place, from 17 million to 21 million to 11 million. I don't even know what we're voting on. I mean, honestly, like, are we substituting? We can't approve all of this. We have 18 million, don't we? I mean, and it's like an either or with the teacher bonuses, but if we give them 1,000 versus 1,500, I'm not seeing what's coming, so I'm kind of like David. I mean, I want to move this forward and get it behind us. I think we keep talking about it and dragging our feet, but I mean, there's a lot of, I thought we were going to go kind of line by line and talk about what we're going to do, so I'm just confused, so please explain.
Okay, I think where we're sitting at is there's a lot of questions still. We do have a plan in front of us that I think some people would still like to look at a little more in depth. You've heard the concerns and the things that we feel, or some of the members feel like need to be looked at in more detail. How long do you think it would take to get more detail added to this?
So what I'm hearing on the detail is we need to work out the bonus part. What other detail are we needing so I can
Let
make
me
clear
ask
that?
let me ask this question before I put y'all on the spot. Did you receive any questions between when we talked about this at work session from any of our board members and tonight's meeting?
I spoke to each board member, but that was off of last board meeting. I was asked to make sure I called, and I did.
Okay, thank you.
I received some info from Ms. Kinzer about the, looking at a $1,000 option for bonuses, and that was included in alternative funding.
Okay. So then I guess everybody's already shared all the details that they want added that we have been alluded to tonight.
Yeah, we did try to, and all staff had input from the beginning. We've been meeting as a group since we've had this application, so it's not, I think we did have to prioritize some things, and some of those things that you saw tonight were some things that were still on that list. I think the special ed opportunity for pro pay was an opportunity that Ms. Ventura came up with, because that is a need for us. We do have educational assistants, but that's not something that she just came up with it just then. She's talked about it in the past. It's just a matter of the funds she has in her federal, in her account. It would be difficult for her to do that.
I guess my real question is getting at all the uncertainty and all the uneasiness about this has already been shared to you by board members contacting you between the work session last time and tonight's meeting, or has anybody contacted you ahead of time about all these? Okay. So I guess my question then becomes, if we push this back, will there be communication between tonight's meeting and whenever we discuss this again? I mean, 'cause I understand not wanting to get into it at a public voting meeting, but nobody reached out, or, you know, you may have had limited input between last time and now. I don't know what would change. Mr. Moore?
I mean, I, for one, sat and spoke with the superintendent exactly what I see as the failure of this plan and what I would like to see. And for me, what that is that I do not see a cohesive plan that is focused on measurable student improvements with this money. What I see are a lot of things, they're the same bag of tricks we've used in multiple other applications that are just pieced together, and I do not see a cohesive, measurable plan. If I'm missing that, I would love for someone to point out to me which parts of this are measurable, which parts we can actually go back a year from now or 2 years from now, and you can show me specific data that shows that this money spent in this method is actually gave us gains academically. And I don't see that. I don't see a cohesive plan. I see pieces that were put together, again, the same things we've talked about for the last 7 years I've been on this board in various forms. And to me, and I think my issue is we have literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with a large sum of money to really move the needle. And I don't see any of these things being novel ideas that are going to move the academic needle. We're just filling holes we already have. That doesn't mean that those holes don't exist. Obviously, HVAC, those are needs we have. All of these things are needs that you could identify. But I just don't see a cohesive plan, and that's my biggest heartburn with this entire thing.
Okay, thank you. Then let me address the staff and ask this question. If you guys were already notified that we need a cohesive plan, why is this not seen as a cohesive plan? Where's the disconnect, I guess, is what I'm getting at. We could have 5 more meetings between now and the end of the month, but I guess if we don't have a clear focus of how we're miscommunicating or what's going on or our needs aren't being met somehow, let's meet every night between now and the end of the month. But if we're talking 2 different languages, we need to solve that before we do anything else. Any comments?
I guess where I take exception to this is we do have a plan, and what you see is maybe not measurable. Are there some things in there that may not be measurable, such as the HVAC? Can you measure what that does? No, absolutely not. But that is something that we were asked to put in there during budget season while we were talking specifically about capital. So we'll shelf that one, which is, the big chunk of this money. When I look through here and we've worked on this, we know class size makes a difference. It's measurable. It gives teachers opportunities to have those smaller class sizes. So do I see how that is measured? Yes. Class size reduction is one of the, the biggest things that teachers will scream and say. I've talked to teachers today that have 21 first graders. It's hard to teach 21 first graders all to read. So, I can keep going on. The remote learning teachers, the plan on that, what we know is, are there going to be students this year that are going to be quarantined or isolated? Yes, they are. And do we want to once again cause disruption to the regular ed classroom teacher as they're trying to teach the whole class where they're trying to juggle and manage both? So, one of the things that we've been talking with the state and our core region is, how do we relieve that? What do we do? And one of the things that's kind of been presented to us is sort of like a homebound type situation. We know they'll be out for 2-3 weeks, possibly longer, hopefully not. So we'll be able to have those dedicated people for the remote kids that are allowed to be remote because they're isolated without disruption to that classroom teacher and the other 20 kids they have. Once again, staff bonus. This was part of the talks that when we were talking budget was we can't give a raise, but we can do a staff bonus through the Esser 3.0. We were asked to put it in. We did. Summer school. We know what summer school can and will do. We also know that next year it's going to be part of the state's plan to say students either have to have high quality, low impact after school tutoring and or summer school to pass certain grades if they fall at a certain point with state testing. So we know we have to have that. That measurable is making sure we give kids those extra skills. The educator recruitment, we've sit here and talked all around it. Yes, it's going to be for high need areas. Yes, it's going to be for hard to fill positions because right now, if I had all my high school principals out here and I said, how many of you have a math position open? Probably all of them would raise their hand, and that's the areas we need to focus. We also see it as kind of incentive too, because we see districts that already do this, that it's an incentive to get people to come work for them. The high quality materials, one thing that we know that one of the reasons our test scores started going down the tubes was teachers did not have and kids did not have those quality materials in their hands. They were trying to wing it for the last 2 or 3 years on their own, and then as a board member called me, he saw a textbook they were using from 1980s. How accurate can that be? We've got to make sure we get high quality materials in these teachers' hands for these students. Is that student-centered? Heck yeah, they need the curriculum. One of the very best minds in the state said once to me that no teacher, unless they are a master teacher, should ever come out of the textbooks because it's so hard to plan and do those things. Yet that's what we're asking all of our teachers to do. Do it without a textbook. So, the results on that, is it measurable? Hopefully, yes, we can start seeing these kids, being impacted in their reading and their math, and not just in the grade they're at, but carry them all the way through high school. This plan goes on and on. Did we just come up with these things randomly? Not at all. We were looking for the most impactful things. We were asking, staff and principals and teachers and, the people down in that are down in the trenches every day. I wish we did have all that money that we could pay even for the alternative list, but we don't. So we have to try to figure out what's most important, what's most impactful right away. And these were the things staff came up with and said, this is what we need. Do we wish we had more money? Of course we do. The HVAC, am I happy with that? Not at all. But that is something this board said that we needed to put in there. And to mention, we've also brought that in front of the commission, saying that it's going to be in there. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Howe.
I'd like to call for the vote.
Have a call for the question. It requires 2/3 majority, if I remember correct, to end discussion immediately and then proceed to vote on this.
I have a real quick question, and no, I can't have a question.
Not yet. Depends on how this vote turns out. All right, we will go ahead and take a vote on the call for the question, which would end discussion immediately, and we would proceed straight to vote. And we will do this as a roll call vote, which means I better write some stuff down. All right, Ms. Parker. Did you say no? No. Ms. Kinzer. Moore. Ms. Irvin. Mr. Sims. I'll reserve my vote. Mr. Hooper.
No.
Mr. Howe. Yes. And I will vote no. All right, so we will continue discussion, but I would like to say I think we are coming towards the end of this discussion. Ms. Parker, your light was on prior to that.
I just want to say, I pulled up what Governor Lee's release said yesterday, and this is what my concern is. We've got $18 million to address. I don't know what our test results look like, but Tennessee data shows decreases in students scoring mastered and on track. Tennessee data shows increases in students scoring below. We have $18 million to effectuate the education. We just heard our superintendent say, we don't really like the whole $7 million for HVAC, but that's what this board committed him to. I don't know how we committed to it when we haven't taken a vote on it, but that representation's been made to the county commission. I feel like we're going around in circles on some of this stuff. We've said this, so this is what we have to put in there, and I'm concerned about this. If we can address this, then we are doing our job as a board. If we're not addressing this, we're not doing our job as a board. I mean, I don't care how great our buildings look. If we're not getting these students educated, then we're not doing what we need to do. And if we need to spend $18 million on this, and the extra and $7 million of it needs to come out of HVAC, then let's figure out what we need to spend that $7 million on. I'm concerned about that. I'd agree with Mr. Moore. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we were already behind the 8 ball as a district, so let's get this going.
Okay, Mr. Sims.
So if we were to strike the HVAC, is staff prepared to give the next most, are they labeled in order of y'all's priority? So if we strike the $6,690,000, we'll start at the top, work our way down until we reach roughly that amount, and that would be y'all's recommendation.
I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna close it after this. Go ahead, Mr. Hey, I know, I haven't forgot you.
I was gonna say, I do see a plan, though I don't think money in of itself doesn't really make test scores better. Find that out in a lot of different levels. But specifically within this plan, I do see a long-term plan to fill in hard to fill spots with the Grow Your Own program. You are basically selecting people of those interest areas, giving them an opportunity. And I do see 2 curriculums being bought in this that will go to help people, including upgrading materials. So I see a lot of that. The only thing that I would consider, changing would be from the 1,500 to the 1,000 and then add the summer program. They're roughly the same, but it's an investment in the teachers more so than just money. You give them training throughout the summer to grow professionally, and I think that's more beneficial than $500.
Okay, thank you. Let me throw something out here, and we can see where we want to go next with this. I do hear, even at some of the smallest levels, there's some alterations that may need to be made, there's some clarifications that need to be made, and there's still some folks that have some questions. Would it be, and I know there's a motion on the floor, so we'll address that next, but would there be the possibility for this board to ask the staff to come back at our work session with a clarified proposal, taking into consideration these conversations yet, and then could we schedule a called voting meeting immediately after the work session, if we reach an approval that night? Obviously, if we don't vote. Or, I guess we would vote either way, but. Ms. Kinzer.
Well, first of all, I kind of think they took the information given to them at the work session, and they did prioritize it. They went and did their due diligence in what we asked them to do. I don't have any objection to any of this. I do say, and I remind you that the $5 million in Esser 2 is still there, that can be for the 1,500 or whatever the bonus is. So you're really talking about a lot more than 18 million. I don't know how talking and giving staff the same when they've gone and done the due diligence. They've done the work. They're the ones that have looked at this for months now. And I'm willing to talk some more about it, but I haven't heard anything definitive other than what you asked for last time, and now I'm seeing it in black and white. So what more do we need to do on this? I just don't know.
That actually brings me to the second part of what I wanted to get to. You have heard that there's some discontent or some questions, confusion, whatever. I would also like the staff, I have no way to enforce this, so I'm just saying it for your own benefit. Keep notes of who calls you and the conversations you have, because I'll be quite honest, I haven't called you with any conversation. That's why I'm not complaining about anything. But have that handy, because that will give you some good notes to come back forward with. Mr. Howell, I believe your light was on next.
If we are having a meeting about this, then I withdraw my motion.
Okay. Withdraw the second? Who had the second on that one? Ms. Kinzer did? Withdraw your second? Okay. I don't want to pressure you.
Did he withdraw the motion?
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Ms. Irvin, I think your light's the last one on this.
So I just want to make my position known. I may have already done that, but I just want to help define what I'm thinking. I have a great deal of respect for our commissioners, so I don't mean this ill respect, but some of us went to the county commission meeting and we sat through it and we heard where their priorities were. I sincerely believe that as our buildings become in need, I feel like they will fund those things. I feel like I have been a part of and I have seen districts that operate on much lower economic standards than us, but their classrooms are given a lot more opportunity. We talked about the chicken and the egg scenario at that situation, and here's what I believe. I believe what you give to your kids is how you get that egg. I have a hard time supporting HVAC units because I believe those will be replaced as they need by our county commission. I may be wrong, but I look at the opportunity that come below that line, things that are going to impact our kids, things that are going to give our kids opportunity, like CTE equipment. I personally believe that if we went to the county commission and asked for these things, they would deny us. I'm going to remind this board that it was the same county commission that asked us to cut our budget, our operating budget, by an additional $4 million. I know we're working to build those bridges, but right now this is our opportunity to impact our kids. and I wanna do that. So that's where my position is, number one.
Thank you. I believe kind of where we're sitting at this now is, and I'll be honest, I trust the work that y'all have done, and I'm not in opposition to any of this. But I do think that as a board, we do need to maybe put just another, little bit of clarification to some of this stuff. So if anybody does have any continued questions or, would like to see something in a different format or way, please contact the staff directly between now and our work session, and that will be the way we go. Mr. Gaines? Yes.
Yeah, especially on the idea of, I think we need, a big item in the funding is those, HVAC units. That certainly will have impact on what would, so to speak, go above the line, and, could potentially bring up some more issues with what you vote on if we're not going to fund the HVAC systems, HVAC units, then, we would certainly, to bring the rest of those things up above the line and go through that, more rationale as to why those were needed, trying to give you the information that you want. So I hope that we will get input from you guys as to, yes, we're not going with these, we don't want these at all, so that, so that we can move forward with, putting the rest of that, together for you.
And I would expect that you will be hearing from each school board member through email or by phone to express their questions or any concerns that may be. All right, let's move forward. We'll take this up at the work session in 2 weeks. Mr. Harriman, we'll move to you next.
Good evening. First item we have for you tonight is the Mcdowell property surplus. If you'll remember, at the work session, we proposed a timeline which would have us listing that property for sale on September 1st with bids opening on September 30th. We'd need two things tonight, or an approval of two things. One is the approval of the timeline and for us to move forward with that plan. And two is if you wish to set a minimum on the sale of that property, and then we can handle it from there. So we're bringing that to you, the timeline we proposed. The minimum we recommended was just to start the conversation, so whatever number you guys decide on, we can move forward from there.
Okay, let me take a motion to approve the timeline first. Got a motion from Mr. Hooper, second from Ms. Kinzer. Any discussion on the timeline of September 1st as a listing? September, did you say 30th, is the closing?
Yes, sir, and for September 30th would be the bid opening. We're gonna do it by sealed bid. November 1st would be the date in which it had to be closed by.
Thank you. All right, is that timeline, any discussion, clarification needed on the timeline? Ms. Irvin?
I'm sorry, my only question is, again, what are we doing to market this? So how are we gonna let I know Murray County, but how are we gonna let people at large know that this is now?
Through the bid process, we are required to do certain things as far as listings and papers and other things. The county just sold the Workman Building in Mount Pleasant. They have significant experience here in recent on how they marketed this. It can be done through social media and other ways. We talked about it at the work session. We think it can be done for a minimal cost that actually would exist within my budget. So we did not include that in the ask because we think we can take care of that and make sure that plenty of people know about this.
Okay, seeing no other lights, we'll go ahead and just take a voice vote. All those in favor of the timeline as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, now item 2, you said the minimum bid?
I was asked to bring you guys a minimum on a sale to consider. We brought a minimum price. I think Mr. Lindsay went ahead and said it last time, of $1 million for that property. That was our recommendation. I know there was discussion in the work session about where that number needed to go, up, down, if that was fine. If you want us to include a minimum at all, we just need direction on how we write that up when we post the bid.
Okay, Mr. Moore, your last song.
I'll make a motion for a minimum of $500,000.
Okay, the motion is for $500,000. Is there a second? I don't see a second. I don't think that's going anywhere. Ms. Irvin?
I make a motion for a minimum of $1 million.
Have a motion from Mr. Howell, a motion from Ms. Irvin, second from Mr. Howell. Any discussion on the the $1 million number? Ms. Irvin?
Commercial property downtown Thrive Columbia.
Yeah, I honestly think whatever we set as a minimum, we're going over it anyway, so that's my feel. Mr. Hickman?
Eric, have we, and I apologize, I didn't ask him, but this just hit me. Have they talked about what that can be zoned for yet?
We have not discussed with the city, generally, and I think, I will send you all an email with the current zoning. I would hate to say the wrong thing in an open meeting, but I will send you the current zoning, and I will speak to the city directly. I'll reach out to Mr. Keltner, and Mr. Massey and ask them what that process would look like, as far as if someone purchased it trying to move forward on something else.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other lights, we will vote on the minimum bid to be set at $1 million even. We'll do a voice vote for this. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. I fought the urge to do the Austin Powers impersonation, yes. $1 million. All right. Moving on now to capital discussion. Mr. Pearman, I almost skipped over that accidentally.
I'm glad you didn't. We posted a document for you that we titled Updated 5-Year Plan. We know that this is not your plan, as far as anything that has been discussed to add to. So when I added these items, they were added in red, and you can see them. I hope you got the chance to look through that. These are items that we talked about since the last time that we actually adopted this plan in December, that we saw as we meet with you, we would think would need to come forward. All of these were based off of conversation, and we wanted just to present everything to you tonight with a cost so that you would see over the 5 years the things in black are the things that you've already approved on a 5-year plan, what they would cost. The items in red are items that we've had discussion with board members, we've had requests from commissioners to look at, and we just wanted to present those to you. Our first two priorities, as we talk through this within the office and within our staff, are still high school seats in the northern part of the county and elementary seats, again, north of Bear Creek Pike, west of Highway 31. And those are still the first two things we have to have. If you see in red, number 3 on your current document is, and we know that openly the hang-up with many commissioners has been the Spring Hill High School building, what we plan to do with that, and their discussion, not your discussion, but their discussion of 2 high school needs in the northern part of the county sooner rather than later. What we talked about internally was just looking at that building. We still have the same concerns with an increased population, with the things we've talked about at nauseum, egress, ingress, the hallways, all the things that we've discussed. So we looked at an option just to say we would renovate the current Spring Hill High School building for $10 million. Within that $10 million, we would look at the athletic fields, the needs in that stadium, the needs with the softball field. We would look at the roof. We would look at mold. And we would determine what needs to be done to bring that up to be a renovated facility, still at 1,200 students. And number 3 is only an option that would be in addition to the new building that we still proposed on the Battle Creek site or any site that would be determined by the board other than that. So we looked at for 85 or for 80 million on 1 and 3. We have 2 high schools, a total of 3,200 seats. That was a discussion. Again, that's not where we're going or what we necessarily, we're just presenting this for everybody. But that does answer some of the questions about the current building. You see that number 4, and Mr. Hickman has talked to me extensively about 5th grade, and we've had talks with you guys extensively. The commission has expressed a lot of interest in trying to get that back. 2 things really hinder us across the district. You know, we've talked about Spring Hill is probably the area where we have space currently to do that. If we did it, though, we would be looking maybe down the road at maybe a 4th Spring Hill elementary school sooner rather than later. But that's part of growth, and that's part of realignment, getting things back. So 2 things we do know is the City of Columbia, even with an additional elementary school that would be built on the north side still could not absorb all of fifth grade. So we have actually moved what was number 6 on that list up to number 4, and that's just a second elementary school in the city proper. Now, when we say that, and we mentioned the first one would be in Columbia, we've made a lot of discussion about it's in Columbia even though it's to the north. This would be something more in what you traditionally consider Columbia, and we looked at it 2 ways, as a standalone building or as additions to the buildings that I have listed there for you. We've proed and conned both, renovations and expansions versus a new building. We figured that to move fifth grade in Columbia back, we need right now around 23 classrooms across our buildings, in addition to what we currently have. If you looked at, say, not necessarily the exact floor plan, but if you look at the current Battle Creek School, we got about 32 classrooms out of that. So we base that on needing a building roughly that size, or additions across the district that you would determine where we go from there. Number 5 on this list tonight is Mount Pleasant, because the other thing we've discussed is we cannot move fifth grade back in Mount Pleasant. We see 7 classrooms that we know would be needed. There may also be some infrastructure to that current building that we would have to do as far as, just making sure we can handle that additional load. We base this budget number, please remember these are all budget numbers, not GMP numbers, off of the work that we did at Marvin Wright, and said this would be somewhat comparable to that. Again, that's a red item. That's not one that you have directed us to do, but through discussion, we wanted to make sure it was there for you, and you saw roughly what that would cost. Number 6, and this is one that honestly, I don't know that it's number 6 on the list, but as you listed them, this is the auxiliary gym at Santa Fe. I've expressed to you that my 23 years in Murray County, auxiliary gym at Santa Fe has been on the list. I will tell you I've had a lot of conversation of late at Hampshire saying, where's our auxiliary gym? So as we move forward, we do spark other conversations, but that is still a priority for us. Number 7 would be a second Culleoka school. I listed it as high school. That is actually my typo there, because you say right past the colon I wrote elementary school, and that's completely on me. I will fix that. But we looked at a new elementary school in Culleoka because the current building just cannot be expanded anymore. We're going to be forced into a 2-building setting down there sooner rather than later. Again, if an elementary school is going to cost $30 million on the north side, and we're doing comparable services across the district as we move forward, as you guys have directed us to do, then our budget number for an elementary school in Culleoka, again, would be $30 million. We've discussed sizing, and we have your minimums. There may be a little bit of a wiggle room within there if you chose to, but we also have additional costs in Culleoka, such as septic, where we would have to install our own system. So we think this $30 million is a good number for a north side, a school in Columbia, or a elementary school in Culleoka. Number 8 on the list is actually something that we discussed, and we had a couple of board members ask us to do this. We know that across our district we adopted standards for our athletic facilities, both indoor and outdoor, and we've kind of been piecemealing that money together. We see a total of around $15 million in work to bring all athletic facilities up to your standards. The number we had for 15 is a couple of years old. We kind of felt a little iffy about it, but if you include Spring Hill High School Stadium in looking at a renovation there for $10 million, then we're certain 15 could cover the rest of it. That's an FYI for you, and we've had board members say, what would it take just to get all of this done so that we quit having to kind of piecemeal? So in black are things that you have approved and you have adopted. In red are things that we've either been asked for through discussion or we see as possible discussion for you concerning fifth grade. And at the bottom, you see the number of the total of what these items would cost. We do see these items, whether they are funded this year, next year, or wherever, as being the next imminent items at this time for the district.
Let me just preface something. I feel like I have to say this before I have a heart attack. I don't feel like we're walking into the next county commission meeting with the ask for $185 million. That's not what this is about.
No.
So I want to make that very clear to anybody who may be reporting on this. This is not what we are going to be coming as an ask.
Correct.
But we have been asked, what are your needs and how much is it gonna total? Now, we have discussed meeting jointly with the county commission next week. And I think this, like you said, was something else we talked about. This is the starting point of our conversation. I wanna make it very clear that, I think there's something, personal opinion, and we can get into this later, some of these things there may be some redundancy in them, in my opinion. But I'll turn this over now. Mr. Hickman had his light on to say.
And I wanna add one other thing that Eric and we had discussed. There's an unintended consequence in here too that we try to cover without saying what it was. We know that the Highway 99 Bear Creek portal is just going to blow up in the next few years. We've been talking to the City of Columbia. We've seen their plans. We know there's about 2,000 houses that are good to go right now, plus some more on the table. So one of the unintended consequences of bringing that new elementary also to the City of Columbia is it's gonna open seats up at the middle school and the elementary that we know we're gonna have once they build all those houses through. So that's part of the plan too, not just because we see growth or we're trying to get 5th grade, but it covers that growth on that Bear Creek portal as well.
Okay, but Mr. White, can I say the 185 is the number that we list here. The items that this board has actually approved on a 5-year plan are 31 million less than that. So we're still looking at a cost over the next 5 years of roughly $150 million. And again, to second what you said, this was not an ask. We just wanted to provide you with the conversation tools that you need to do your work.
Thank you. Ms. Irvin.
So last time we met Mr. Lindsay, and he's not here to speak for himself, but he said, we came to him. Maybe it's time we think outside the box. And I think, that's where we were going to pick up tonight. I thought I've had, and like I say, I feel like this is a giant tug of war for me, because you hear things this way, and it's back and forth. But here's something that I'm not seeing on here that we've really even considered in this plan. We originally said we were going to go to the county commission with our ask. We were going to ask them for what we need. But there were talks months back about what it would look like to renovate Spring Hill High School to the 1,800 seat capacity. I know we've had many, many talks on that. I've had some county commissioners mention that to me. Is that off the table? Why is that off the table? And I know it seems like I remember something about the fire marshal and whatnot, but I mean, I would think that a renovation there is that. Can you help me remember why we're not considering that anymore?
I think in our initial talks, as we talked through everything, we came to the kind of the overall consensus as a group that there are a lot of variables that we see internally with Spring Hill High School. We can expand it. We will do whatever you say. I will go out on a limb and say you're not going to be happy with it when it's done, because it's not going to be a long-term solution to what we're really moving forward to. The issues that we discussed at that site, the width of the hallways. Remember, this was a school that was originally designed as a 612. It was not designed for 1,200 high school students. That was never the intent of the building. The egress issues that we have onto the Nashville Highway, onto the old Nashville Highway, through the back entryway, and I feel like that in my world, this back entryway, this gravel road that leads out of the back of Spring Hill High School, in some people's mind is the path to Oz, because they tell me it solves all problems. We're going to go down that yellow brick road. We just open the back gates and it's great. We have really big not structural physically to the building, but to the site. We're locked in. GM owns 4 acres in the middle of it that they don't give us. We have driveways in the middle of it to student parking that are across property that we do not own. There's going to be work done to the exit ramp on that end of Saturn Parkway. And just so everyone's clear, Saturn Parkway does wrap around that GM plan and actually ends at Spring Hill High School. So there's going to be exit work there. They are going to come across our property in some form or fashion. We already have letters from the state saying they need to come in and do soil samples on the front part of the property. We know that there are going to be works done there that we can build that into a bigger building. We don't feel like that if we go to 1,800 students at that site, it's gonna be a long-term site. We'll live in it. We live in lots of buildings that aren't perfect, but you're gonna have a 30-year-old building that's been expanded. We talk about 50 to 60-year lifespans, and you're gonna have a building that the bulk of the building is over halfway through its lifespan by the time that expansion comes about. I'm not trying to talk you out of that option, but I think you pay me to tell you what we see internally, and that's what we see, is that it's a site that offers lots of issues. Can it be expanded? Yes. We said $50 million. We can expand it. You know, if you do a per student or a per seat cost, divide 50 million by 600, or, you know, 70 by 2,000, it's much cheaper in the long run to build a new site and to move that. Again, your question is, why did the board settle on that? I think across the Saturdays that we discussed the pros and the cons, and as the plan came together, it came together as a new high school. The commission, again, sees two needs, but that's really on you to be able to send back. And again, I'm not trying to talk you out of that at all. I just see lots of issues that we see that sound great to people because it's cheaper and, oh, you'll have this, but in the daily operation and the management of the physical site, they're not really what you think you're going to get in the end.
So let me ask you another question. As it's proposed here, number 3 would be leaving the current Spring Hill High School as is at 1,200 capacity, $10 million for repairs, and that would be a tentative fix for the next unforeseeable future. So at the $70 million cost for a new high school, are we still looking at building a 2,000-seat campus, or are we going to look at doing like a 1,200-seat campus and with expandability? Because, I mean, and I don't know what is the cost difference there, because I would think 2/3 of a building would possibly equal some money off. I mean, is that an option?
It would equal money off on the front end, and depending on what building costs and material costs do over the next however many years, you would have to say, is it really a savings long term? It's kind of like people that say when they widened to 840, they should have came to Saturn, but they didn't because it's going to cost more down the road now. Give you an example, Rutherford County built Rockville High School, a 2,000 student building, actually I think a 2,200 student building. It opened 2 years ago. They're setting portables because they see themselves at 2,400 at the start of school. I don't know that our growth is as rapid as theirs, but I do know that growth in the northern end of the county is much different than it is anywhere else. And I do think that's, I'm not saying that to anyone on this board, because I think you guys are fully aware. But I think to the general citizen that doesn't travel through the north end of this county, it's a very hard concept to understand how fast it truly is growing up there. So my recommendation would, could we build a 1,200 high school cheaper than a 2,000? Yes. Are you going to need to expand that at some point, and it costs more money to expand it? I think that an addition would end up costing more money in the long run for 2,000 seats.
I'm just thinking outside the box, and I'm asking the hard questions because I want to think through this to you, because again, I've been pulled, I mean, I know the growth in that end of the county. I fully understand that. But I've also listened to this team here and to different input, and I've heard some people say it's not wise for us to have a school half empty for years and not be meeting these other needs. So it's like, you know, one minute we're going to be at capacity, the next minute we're going to have a school half, you know, empty. So I'm like, which is it, you know? So that's my thought. And if we could save $20 million or $30 million and get a high school and get a high school that fits 1,200 kids, get another elementary school built, and then when that need comes, grow it into what the need is. I mean, obviously, yes, future construction costs. I'm just trying to get a realistic estimate, and I know none of us have that crystal ball, but I'm wanting to be a wise steward of taxpayers' dollars, and I don't want to hear the complaints when we've got a half-empty school and people are calling, groaning about what we haven't done in the other end of the county.
And-
So that's where I'm trying to get a logistic feel.
And I want to kind of answer it, and Eric can kind of follow up. You know, one of the things that we brought up, because everybody started throwing out there, well, with Spring Hill, if we don't make it an elementary, do we make it a this or that or the other? And Mr. Moore brought up a good point. He said, is it in our 5-year plan? And we're like, no. Then he said, we can't really talk about that then. So, you know, one of the things we did, and like Eric said, was we put this in here as a suggestion. The board needs to adopt as this, you know, how they want to move forward with the 5-year plan. But by putting it in there, if you know, you can look at it, do we want 2 high schools, or do we want to look at Spring Hill in a different light? Do we want to, as Mr. Lindsay said, to think outside the box? And, you know, some of the ideas that got thrown around. But I'm kind of, you know, Eric and I have talked about this in depth, and, you know, we've got to really think forward, because that area is just going to continue to expand. I don't think they've said no to any neighborhood or anything they've built there yet. And looking at that number right now, that would be part of the zone that we'd have to talk about. How would we want to zone if we do want the 2 high schools open? Do you want to zone them half and half, or do you want to zone one more or the other? But it wouldn't be wise, or we'll fall back into the same problem we have now. If we continue to have the existing Spring Hill High School at that 1,000 mark, we'll still be having the same problems with the hallways, with the roadway, through, you know, all of those same things. So it would be really, what I would suggest to the board is, when we get back, we do probably need to start talking about that 5 and 10 year plan, because just since we talked about it last fall, things have changed, and they have changed rapidly.
Well, and let me just jump in here and steer this conversation just a moment. I don't see us voting on anything tonight. We have a 5-year plan, and we're sticking, you know, we've laid that out very clearly. I do think that it's helpful in our discussions with our funding body to say these are some other options that we could look at, because obviously we can have the greatest plan in the world, but we're not going to fund it with couch cushion change and cupcake sales. We've got to have county commission buy-in. So I think that's where this conversation, we're not voting on anything one way or another tonight. We've already done that. So I do think that this is going to be a good conversation guide as we go forward. And, you know, I've got some input that I'll be happy to email you this week on some of these things, but this is going to give us a good talking point, basically, nothing else, as we go forward with the county commission and open dialogue.
So, if I may,
Yeah.
As a representative that directly represents Santa Fe, I feel like I need to defend that school, because here's what I'm seeing here. Tentatively, we keep, again, getting pushed down, 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 and now we've moved from here back down to here. And that's concerning to me. It makes me feel like Santa Fe's being shown very low priority. And then we mentioned Hampshire, but clarify this for me, because, and I should, and I apologize, I haven't thoroughly toured Hampshire, but doesn't Hampshire have an auditorium that can be used as a practice facility? They do not? They don't, okay. And then we also need to look at the number of competing sports teams. So yes, I don't want to, I mean, I'd like to see that for Hampshire as well, but I know the need at Santa Fe. I know we got kids practicing to 10 o'clock or later at night, kids out in the freezing cold because they have no other option. So I want to make sure this board and the county commission understands that that's no longer a want. I know a gym can sound like a want. That is a need, a 23-year, as you said, past due need. So I'm not thrilled that that keeps getting put further down the list. A $4 million fix to me would look like that would be one of the easiest projects here to fund. So for whatever it's worth, I just wanted to stand up for that situation.
Thank you.
And I would say that we see auxiliary gyms as classrooms. Big gyms are classrooms more so than anything as well. We have multiple classes that meet in all of our athletics over the time. It is still part of what you've approved to go to the board. And again, this was just how we sent this back to you. 2 things, Mr. White, and I promise I'll be quiet. You know I can do that if I need to. Remember this, and someone's going to correct me because someone at home is going to have an actual number. 80% of the people in Spring Hill live on the Williamson County side. 80% of the land in Spring Hill is on the Murray County side. So if Spring Hill is a booming city, it's booming our way because we have the land. The need for that high school is something we've talked to you for 2 to 3 years about. We've said it every time. This is the number one need that we have. We look also at, we've rezoned kids to Central High School this year, and we see a boom right now, we think maybe at that end as well. So there may be, and I'm just saying, we listed the number 3 on here as a discussion point because as growth comes, we see that greatly. The last thing that I will say is there are 6,000 approved rooftops in the city of Columbia right now. We don't know a timeline on their building. Some builders sometimes take 5 to 7 years to start a project. Some start the day after approval. So we are looking at how these elementary schools and that number in the city of Columbia as well would impact this plan.
Thank you. Mr. Howe?
So, I too have a few issues, but the biggest thing is you've put number 3 as a new high school, or as a renovated high school. I can't see us operating 3,200 or even 2,400 and it be at half capacity, or maybe 3, 4. I mean, if we get to that point, we are an MOE county. We are in the hole on this operating budget, $4.7 million. And now we're going to operate 2 high schools. I don't know where we're going to come up with the money to run another high school, but I would say that would conservatively cost, I don't know, $2 or $3 million. So next year, in addition to our woes, to our going into the hole, so to speak, we're going to add an additional $2 or $3 million to operate, or 3 years from now. So I mean, I just don't see that as a number 3. Like that's like a number 15.
Can I tell you why that was?
Hold on, I'm not done.
Yes, sir.
So, what I could envision and be supportive of is not another high school. And if we build them a new high school with 2,000, that will last a little while because we're growing. I acknowledge that. I know that. But northern Maury County is not the only area in Maury County that's growing. One of the areas I represent, 2 of the areas I represent is growing. Culleoka and Mount Pleasant, they're both growing. Culleoka is at capacity, not below, just right at capacity. I'm hearing Mount Pleasant from tonight, they're reaching capacity as well in their 3 schools. So this is where I have a hard time saying, hey, we're going to fund these 2 high schools. And I know that's not what you're saying. But even to entertain that idea, when we have other needs throughout the entire county, what I would be supportive of is possibly a 612 magnet school or something like that, because that could alleviate all across, that could alleviate places at Central, that could alleviate places at Culleoka, that could alleviate Mount Pleasant, that could alleviate everywhere. I would be open to something else where we're thinking outside the box. Because what I'm seeing right now with these numbers beside them, I see numbers as priorities. And what I'm seeing is Culleoka went from 6th to 7th. Santa Fe went from being like 3rd or 4th, now it's down to 6th. I'm seeing areas that are experiencing growth because Santa Fe is in the northern end of our county. I don't know it's in the northern end. It's experiencing growth as well. I'm seeing everybody get pushed back down to the bottom except for the north. And now we're looking at, by these numbers, priority-wise, putting 2 high schools up there? Sure, 10 years from now, 7 years from now, will we need additional high school? Maybe. I don't have a crystal ball either. But to even include that in third position of priorities, I would rather, if we're going to do this as a a la carte, as a buffet, or whatever you want to call, I'd see bullet points, not numbers, because I just can't. Tomorrow, this could all change, and we could reshuffle this whole thing. That's where I have issues. I have to represent not only Maury County, but I have to represent my constituents, and my constituents from various places are screaming, what about us? What about us? We're not the only ones. Spring Hill's not the only ones that have the growth. In addition to, I'd see a little bit on here on number 4 where we're talking about the new sites in Columbia. I thought we had a plan about that. I thought we were gonna add on to certain schools, and I don't see in here where it says anything about consolidating some of those smaller schools. Now, when I say consolidate, I'm not saying we're closing out buildings and getting rid of them. We have purposes for these buildings. If we close, for instance, not saying we're closing anything, but if we close Riverside, that's a wonderful building. It's a great building. It would make an excellent pre-K. And if we had pre-K at one location, I believe we have a problem with pre-K right now of you have different sites that are full, some are not, some are. It's hard for parents to navigate this system. If we have pre-K, Riverside Elementary, pre-K, you call one phone call. Oh, I've got 7 classes, and 3 of them are full, so I've got 4 available. Makes things a lot easier. Highland Park, for instance, wonderful building, great shape. Make a wonderful central office. It's still centrally located in our entire county, but it's a small school. And it's unfortunate that we just can't continue to operate these small schools within 2 miles of another small school. So I'd like to see some elaboration on that new school, perhaps, piece.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Parker?
Do we need 3,200 seats in Spring Hill for high school students?
No, ma'am. We've said that to the commission.
Okay.
I will say the reason that we listed this as 3, this is the sticking point
Right.
that tripped us up. The Spring Hill High School building, even after they pulled it from their funding plan and pulled from 85 to 75, we still had commissioners that said, well, we don't know what you're gonna do with that building after you build a new building. We're completely open to anything you want to do with it, but it's number 3, and it's in red, remember, and these aren't the words in red that everybody wants to live by, okay? But it's number 3 because that building, regardless of what we wanna do or we say, is directly tied to the funding body's opinion of number 1 and 2. So in some form or fashion, we have to be able to say, whether we like it or not, this is how we're gonna use this building. Because and again, this is me from having stood in front of them for quite a few hours now. If we can't answer that question, then we just need to pass this off, because they want to know what we're doing with that building.
Well, and let me just say, I think that goes back to Marlena's point, which is when we talked about this originally, our ideal plan was to build a new high school. But the sticking point is, what do we do with Spring Hill High School? So in my mind, even though there are those issues, I'm kind of circling back around to, we do a $50 million renovation, we get it up to 2,000, and then when we need to build a new high school between Bear Creek and Spring Hill, we still have Battle Creek as an option. We don't even have to buy land. And then we can put another high school in to serve that growing area as well down the road. I'm not wedded to the 70,000 for the new high school, because I really think that at this point, with what we've heard from the commission, and like Chad said, knowing the needs that we have throughout our county, I don't want to sink $70 million into one part of the county at this point. I think there's a lot of needs throughout the county, whether it's Santa Fe, Culleoka, Columbia. I want kids back in 5th grade in elementary school, definitely within the next 2 years. So just making that personal request. So I just think that we have a lot of needs, and I don't think that, I just think we got to rethink it, because the commission's kind of forced our hands on it, unfortunately.
Thank you. I would say that as we prepare to talk to the county commission next week, that may be something that you have in your back pocket, that contingency plan of taking out number 1, doing something different with number 3. I'm like you. I mean, I don't see how you're going to put 2,000 kids in that building. You're going to have to build almost a second facility on that plot. Well, yeah, and you know, I'm just saying whatever what everybody else is saying. I don't know. Just
so last thing, I promise, and again, my job is to bring information and to make you think. I will quote to you a quote that I gave to the commission, And I think if you go back and watch what I told the commission was, one of my Culleoka board members said, we're tired of talking about up north, but until we talk about up north, we can't talk about anywhere else. So I just share that with you in no disrespectful way whatsoever. We know what our needs are. We know what the sticking point is as well. I'm open, and hey, we're the quarterback, you're the coach. You call the play, we run it. But if you ask, you know I'll always say.
Well, and I'll say they're building houses in West Columbia too, but it's nowhere close to what they're building in Spring Hill. I mean, there's growth everywhere, but I mean, let's be realistic. Miss Irvin, your light's on.
Mr. Perryman, in numbers 2, 4, and 7, we're asking for 3 separate elementary schools at an approximate cost of $30 million. Here's my question for you. Does that price include securing land? And the reason why I ask that is, do we think it might be wise to pull those out and maybe tentatively mark like a $28 million build and then like a $2 million secure land? Because here's my thing I've heard from some on the commission as well, is that we're going to need to start planning, and it takes, as you've said, it takes time to do that. So I think instead of looking at that as a whole, maybe we should also put that as a like dividing that out, because you got to have the land before we can have. So that's a recommendation I may suggest.
We can do that. I would say to you, we have a 5-year plan. You're the only governmental body in the county that has a 5-year plan. So when other people tell you you need to start planning, you did. No one else did.
I've reminded them a couple times.
I know that. I've heard you do that. The second thing is, again, these are, and you know that we've not had any funding far enough to actually present plans that we could get to a GMP. So these are always just budget numbers. However we move forward with that, I will say this: we've had discussion with commissioners who've said on the side you need to be buying land, and I've mentioned to them whether, and this would be something to come back to you, I would love for us to have a dedicated fund of money that was already available, so that when we identify land, we don't go through the months process over and over and try to work in secret the way that we do to secure money before we can make an offer. So I'll just say that to you.
All right. Thank you. I think this has been a healthy discussion. I think this gives us some things to think about as we prepare for our meeting next Wednesday with them. I do think that, no, it's Tuesday. I've said Wednesday every time I've mentioned it, but it's Tuesday, a week from today. I think it's 4:30, but I'm not. I'll find that out and email everybody. So thank you. I think this is going to get us in the right direction. It's going to be at the commission room downtown. All right. Next on our agenda, new policy number 4.213. We have a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote. All those in favor of approving this policy, say aye. Any opposed? None. Other business, any bids that we need to know about? Seeing none. I got 2 things I want to mention. Settle down. Believe me, I'm not the one, well, never mind. 2 things. I do have a compilation of all the evaluations that I will email out. They've been on my computer and I haven't had my charger at the house, so I will email those out tomorrow. I've had somebody ask me tonight about the process of appointing a 3rd district representative. That was on the agenda for tonight's admin committee meeting on the county commission. So I'm eager to go back and watch that to actually see how that turned out. With that, I believe now we can entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, get up and leave. Thank you.